everybody, it's Nicole, and this is the Trappings and Trinkets Knitting Podcast. Today I have some finished objects. I have some sewing. I have other things that I can't think of right now, but hopefully I will later. Let's talk about finished objects, shall we? I'm going to put a little clip of last 2 weeks ago, that podcast in here, so that you can see this shawl unblocked. So I'm going to hold this up right now. The very deepest part right now, if I hold it up to the top of my head, where does it go down to? Like mid-stomach. When I show you this shawl all blocked, I think it's going to be enormous. We'll see. And now, let's take a look at it. Now that it's blocked. Da 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 da. Check it out. It's huge and beautiful. This is based off of the Bernstein pattern, but I think, as I said in an earlier podcast, I didn't end up really using the pattern because the English translation was pretty hard to follow. I do think that the German, the one that was originally written in German, that must be a good pattern because there are numerous finished project pages, but the project notes are mostly written in German. So I think that probably it's a translation issue, but I wasn't able to follow it. And that's coming from someone that is very familiar with how to make a triangular shawl, how to do garter stitch, how to do mesh, how to do drop stitch. So like, I kind of know everything that goes into this, and I still wasn't able to follow what the instructions were. So I can't really recommend the pattern. But I did look at the pictures and say, well, it's just garter stitch sections alternating with mesh sections, and I know how to do those, so yeah, ta-da. I did go ahead and do a little picot bind off. I was inspired by a Knit Night buddy who had worn her picot edge shawl to Knit Night a few weeks back, and I was like, that's really cute. I'll do that with my shawl. So I did. So you can see how much bigger this is once it's blocked. I think in the other video, I think I put it up to the top of my head and say, let's see how big this was. Well, now it's so big it doesn't fit in the screen. And in fact, it's laying on my lap. So I would guess this is like, maybe 2 feet, maybe 24 inches, maybe a little bit longer than that. Deep and wide, it is bigger than my arm span. So I would say it's probably 70 inches wide or so. I can reach all the way out and still have these little sections dangling. So that's probably about 70 inches wide. So it's a really nice size shawl, and it's still lightweight because it's sock yarn. This is Lemonade Shop yarn. I think hers, well, the one that I use, because she has a few different bases, but this one is called the Strong Sock Base. And I've got it on inside out, but mesh looks pretty good from both sides. And this is in the Toxic Hippo colorway, so it's just a nice medium gray with a lot of bright, almost neon color splotches on it. So very happy with the way that turned out, and it was very fun to knit. Garter is very relaxing, and the mesh is a very simple 3-stitch kind of combination. So real easy to remember, so you don't have to sit there and look at your notes. Let's talk about this sweater that I know I've shown you a couple times before, but it is totally finished now with the buds in place. So this is the Branches and Buds Pullover by Kerry Bostick, and it is a fantastic pattern. I was thinking like, oh, once I'm to the buds section, then I'll just read the pattern and it will tell me how to sew them on. But in fact, it just says something like, and now sew on the buds. So it's kind of up to you to decide how exactly to do that. Once I experimented a little bit, I think I tried about 3 different ways of doing it. I came up with the way that I really liked the way it looked. So I was just consistent from then on out. I didn't take off my first 2 experiments because they weren't terrible looking, but they were just done a little bit differently, and I can't even find them now. So they must not have been so different. But anyway, the way that I did it was that I decided, you have your upside down V's and your right side up V's. So I was doing mine on upside down V's, and you have your yarn on a tapestry needle, and I was coming in from the back of the fabric. I would wrap the yarn around, go back to the back, go back to the front, wrap it around to the back, and then I would poke my needle out kind of in between the two legs, go up through the two loops that are here on the outside of the fabric, and then poke it back to the wrong side. Okay, so it's like 2 loops around the V, and then poke it through, and then to the back. So that little last bit kind of tightens up the loops that you made, and kind of, it keeps them from being like flopping around. So that's what I ended up with. And some, you know, you could use lots of different scraps to make your buds, but I ended up just using one long variegated yarn. So I did cut it into 3 strips, and I did my, like, I would do this top branch and then the middle branch all the way around, and then the bottom branch, because it is the same on both sides. And the reason I did that was because I wanted the colors of the variegated yarn to be spread out randomly. And by doing one branch at a time, it kind of helped those colors be in different spots. So that's what I did. And the using variegated yarn also helped so that I didn't have a million ends to weave in at the end. So I was really thrilled with it. I wear that sweater all the time. I made it out of Malabrigo Arroyo. The brownish neutral color is sandbark, and the whitish, I think that was called Pearl. No, it was not called Pearl. It was called Natural. I bought Pearl as well because I was ordering it online, but the Pearl was too gray. It was too close to the brown. The natural white shade was a lot, it's kind of a creamy white. That was a much better contrast. Moving on, let's talk sewing. So you can see right behind me here, I have a dress that I made this weekend. Here, we'll turn it a little so you can see it better. So this is off the Simplicity pattern number 1080, and I made this view right here. And as you can see, here, put it so you can see both of them. As you can see, I did the fabric a little bit different. This actually wasn't on purpose. You can see that the top fabric here is a lot longer than the way my dress ended up. And that's because when I handed my two bolts of fabric to the person at Joann's, I said, I want 1 yard and 3/4 of this one and 1 yard of this one. And then I started thinking about how many yards of the other fabrics in my basket I needed, and I wasn't paying attention. So she reversed the two. She gave me 1 yard of the one, you know, she reversed it. So when I came home and started laying things out to cut them, I was like, this isn't right. So I just modified the pattern a little bit. It didn't quite work because, well, I won't go into details about why it didn't quite work, but the crux of the problem was that the bottom of the skirt is wider than the top of the dress. So you actually need more. If you're going to like chop it in half here, you need more than 1 yard and 3/4 than if you do this narrower part on one cut. So I made it work. It took a little bit of modification, but that's fine. I actually like the way that this looks better. I mean, what I ended up with is cute, and I will totally wear that. But I kind of like this better. So I found this pattern to be very true to sizing. On the back here, there's a measurement chart, and let's see, with the bust, if I go by my bust and hip measurements, I am exactly in between the medium and the large sizes. So they do it by 2-inch increments, and then they leave out 2 inches. So it's like the medium is, for the bust, it's 36 to 38. And then the large is 40 to 42. So if you're between 38 and 40, like me, I'm not really sure what you're supposed to do. So I actually just cut the large, and I thought it's easier for me to take it in a little bit on the sides than it would be for me to try to skimp on the selvage edge and like make really small seams if I had cut the medium. So that seemed to be the right choice. So I would say if you're between sizes, or if you're not sure, just cut the larger, because you can always take something in. It's a lot harder to make something bigger if you've cut it too small. So the sizing worked fine. This one, I think it had like 6 different pieces or something like that. It was not difficult to put together. It did have about, I would say 25 steps, I think it was, but probably 8 of those steps had to do with these pleats that maybe, I'm not sure you can see them. I'll go get it. Dude, check out my pleats. So these pleats right here on the top and the bottom. Now, if you do this the way the dress is supposed to be made, these pleats will be entirely on the top fabric because of the place that I made my fabrics, where I changed fabrics. I wanted it to be like an empire waist kind of look. So that was exactly where the pleats were stationed. So I just made them like half on the top, half on the bottom, and then lined them up when I sewed it all together. So that worked well. This little cord that ties in the back to kind of bring in the waist, that is kind of housed in one of the pleats, the one to the far side. So on each side of the front, you have that cord. And I love the pockets on this. They are really nicely designed. Whoop. So they have a little pleat in the front, so that kind of helps them stand out a little bit from the dress. They're not, you can definitely put quite a bit in there. I went ahead and made bias tape to finish off the edges of the pockets. On the pattern here, you can see that they just chose like a solid color bias tape to go all the way around the pocket. I didn't love the look of that. I wanted my pockets to look, to just look like one piece. So I made bias tape from the blue fabric. I also made bias tape to finish off the sleeves and the neckline. And I even went with bias tape for the bottom. And that one actually I wouldn't have done, except that because of that whole issue with there not being quite enough fabric to cut the pieces as big as they're supposed to be, I didn't want to shorten the skirt at all. So I didn't want to have to tuck in the edge a couple times to make a nice hem. So I just went ahead and made some bias tape and then just sewed it right along the bottom all the way around. So that worked really well. And this will be a fun, just kind of, wear around the house dress. I'm probably not going to wear that out in public very much, but it's a nice light summer dress. And who knows? I mean, I have an octopus dress that I wear out in public, so maybe I will wear this out. We'll see. Other adventures in sewing were done with this Simplicity pattern 8422. And for these, I just went with the very plain legging. I did not go with the shredded up cool person or the like military pelvis, whatever that is. Or here there's like Thunderdome leather. So I just went with the plain. And I got a couple of fabrics off of fabric.com website. The first one is very kind of slinky, athletic kind of fabric. And this one, I actually thought when I made these that like these are going to be too thin and like my underwear is going to show through them and I won't want to wear them. But in fact, even though this fabric is very thin, I can wear them no problem. Underwear stays hidden. They're really nice. My second pair, which is a little, this one was like, I want to say this was like 12% spandex. This other fabric was only 5 or 6% spandex and still certainly like plenty of stretch. So that was not a problem at all, but it was very see-through. So it's not so see-through when you just like look at it like this, but once it's on your body and it's stretching, yeah, my underwear is 100% visible. So this will be either wear it only with a very long shirt for like walking around the neighborhood, or kicking around the house. I actually made these for, I've been doing a ballet bar class at my gym, and I thought I would wear them to that, but I won't wear this one because there's a lot of like arms up in the air, which pulls up your shirt, which means my underwear will be on full view. So I won't wear them there, but they'll be fine for just, going for walks, that kind of thing. So the one thing about this pattern, let me get that back. So this has the same body measurements chart. So for this one, I was just measuring hips. So my hips were, once again, right smack in the middle of medium and large. And so for this one, I just cut right in the middle of the medium and large lines. So I didn't choose, I just kind of made my own size, and I just kind of split the difference between those two lines because they were right next to each other on the pattern. I would just cut right halfway in between them. So this was my first pair. So I made them up, and they looked like MC Hammer pants. They were enormous. So they were not at all like what leggings are supposed to look like. So I ended up, I tailored them, I sewed farther in on each side of each leg and put them on again, and they still didn't fit right. And so what I ended up doing was just putting them on inside out, taking pins and just kind of pinning that extra material so that I had a guide for like how much needed to come off. Then I sewed that up, and finally they fit correctly. Now, after I had my finished leggings done, I laid them out on top of my pattern pieces again so that I could see like what size should I have cut in the first place. And as it turns out, and I had to also kind of visually leave a little bit of extra room on each side for seam allowance, because you need at least like a 1/4 inch there to sew. So as it turned out, I should have cut the size small. Now, the size small on the body chart here says it is for a hip size of 34.5 to 36 inches. My hips are 41 inches. So that does not, that's not good sizing. You would think, well, maybe it's because most of the patterns are sized for using a more solid, less stretchy fabric, but it says right here in the recommended fabrics, sized for stretch knits only. Activewear knits, jersey, spandex blend, stretch velvet, 2-way stretch, which is exactly what this is. So I don't know what's up with this pattern, but if you are using this pattern, you are probably going to need to cut at least one size smaller, if not 2 sizes smaller. So just beware if you decide to use it. There is some issues with this pattern just being way too big. So once I modified them and tailored them up, they look great and they fit great. I'll put a couple little pictures in here so you can see the finished leggings. But I'm really happy with those. So let's talk works in progress. I apologize because the only work in progress I have is not that exciting. Whoops, earthquake. Because I can't really show it to you all that much because this is a design project, and definitely I will be looking for test knitters. So, not real soon, but in a month or two. It's something that I hope to release in the fall because it's a long sleeves. It's a lightweight sweater, but it's a long sleeve sweater. But anyway, it's made from Cashluck's fine Sweet Georgia yarn, and it is super, super nice. So right now you can just see there's lots of stockinette, but that's not all that's going to be happening on this sweater. It's going to have some nice details that you may enjoy. So that's really what I'm working on right now. So I'm sorry I can't tell you more about it, but I promise I will when it's time. A project of the future I could show you is in my Make 9 collage. you may have seen that there is a zip up hooded striped sweater in there. And I'm actually going to make that for my husband, and he knows I'm going to make it for him. So this is not spoiling any secrets, but I did buy the yarn to make it with, and I got some Malabrigo. This looks too dark on the camera. It's really not black. It's like a chocolate brown. So Malabrigo Rios is the main color, and the two contrasting colors I got are this green and this maroon, and these are, let's see, the brand is Feza, and it's called Organically Hand-Dyed Harvest. It's a worsted weight yarn, and the fun thing is that these are dyed using natural dyes. So this red color was made from black grapes, and the green was made from figs. So they just used fruits to make the colors there. So that's kind of cool. And it's a really nice color. It's very saturated. It's very even. I was really impressed that that was a natural dye. So that is a project of the future. Something else that's been going on around here is that I did finally get around to making some of my smaller pom-poms. I've had these cut forever because I'm using the little odds and ends when I don't have enough faux fur fabric to cut my regular size pom-poms. I cut smaller size, and I thought I'll make those up eventually, and they would be fun for, like, if you have baby hats. These are the very smallest size. The medium size is more like this. So if you have like a baby or a small child's hat, here's the two size options. These would work really well. If you have ear flap hats that have little cords and you want to put a little fur tuft on the bottom of the cord, the smallest size would work well. Here's another smallest size. You could put them at the ends of shawls. You could put them scarves, just anywhere. I've even seen people that hang these from like backpacks and purses and that kind of stuff. So the tiny tufts are the very smallest size, and the petite is the medium size. And then my regular size just doesn't have a special name. It's just faux fur luxury pom-poms. So those are in the shop. You can get them on snaps if you really want to, but I would assume that for most of the things that people would use these really small ones for, you probably would end up tying them, but it's totally up to you. Both options are available. So I wasn't sure how much I had to talk about today, so I actually went around and collected questions from a bunch of different sources. Message board, like a lot of them were in personal messages to me. Most of these questions I've already answered to the person that asked them, but some of these questions were really good, and I thought other people might want to know this too. So I just collected a lot of questions, and I thought I'd answer a couple of them today because I kind of forgot that I had all that sewing stuff to talk about. So maybe we don't need to do all these questions today, but I'll do a couple of them just to get started. Question number 1. What is a polite response to people, parentheses, not knit-worthy, asking you to knit something for them? My usual reply is, I can teach you to knit, but some people offer to pay me. Then I respond, you may not realize how many hours it takes, but what I really want to say is no. I mean, saying no, or I don't have the time, or the real truth, you're not knit-worthy. How do you handle telling people you don't want to knit for them? Okay, so there's a couple questions in here. The first one is, how do you handle saying no? I feel like saying no is something that people have to come to the place in themselves that they've decided that they're going to do the things that they find value in. And if you haven't come to that place of feeling like you're important enough to decide what things you want to do and what things you don't want to do, you're going to have a really hard time saying no. So first, I would just encourage you to kind of think about your priorities and think about the things that you enjoy doing, and do not ever feel bad about declining an offer to do something that you don't want to do. Now, certainly we're all adults and we do things that we don't want to do, but those can still be our priorities. There's like, I don't love cooking dinner, but I cook dinner a lot because my family needs to eat. So I don't see that as me like betraying my values, because one of my values is I want my family to be healthy. So that's kind of a different thing. But if someone says to me, hey, I would love it if you'd come over and help me clean out my garage. Like, nobody ever says that. But what if they did? I would think to myself, well, cleaning out your garage is not really a priority of mine. So, sorry, I feel like I don't have time to do that. But, let's get together for dinner sometime. So don't ever feel bad for saying no to something that doesn't align with what you see your purpose as being. The second thing is, she's apparently telling people, actually I've done this before too. And I have a friend who's probably going to be like, wait a minute, she said that to me. Yes, I did. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So she says that when people ask her to knit things, her answer is usually, I can teach you to knit. And I do say that, but I say that not because I think people are going to be like, oh, well, no, never mind. Like, I say that because genuinely, I would love to teach you to knit, rather than just knit you something. So I have a friend who a couple Christmases ago sent me a picture of this stock. It was a Christmas stocking. Maybe he didn't even ask me to knit it. Maybe he asked me if I could teach him how to knit it. Is that how it went? I don't know. This is a couple of years ago now. So the trick is that he lives in California and I live in Illinois. And so me trying to teach him how to knit consisted of like, I feel like we did like a FaceTime, and then maybe I sent him some like links to YouTube videos or something like that. So I kind of long distance, I really genuinely did try to kind of get him started. Anyway, long story short, I did try to teach him, but I knew that it was a color work pattern. Like, I knew there was no way that he was going to master knitting and also do a decent job at color work in that short of a time. So even as I was teaching him to knit this thing, I was actually knitting it on my own with the intention of sending it to him. So he ended up, maybe he learned to knit a little bit, but he did end up getting one stocking for himself and one stocking. I think he really wanted it to give it to his sister. So I made two, knowing that he probably was going to give one of them away. But I'm not really sure how that all ended up with him and his gifts. But yeah, it was fun to make those. And there are certain people in my life that are very knit worthy. And if they ask for something, I would love to make it. My mom, my husband. My kids have no interest in me knitting things for me, but in the future, when they grow up and they realize how cool I am, they might ask me. I have a couple friends who I would absolutely knit anything that they asked for. But beyond that, probably there's not a lot of people that I would just knit for free. Knitting is not a cheap hobby, and it is definitely not a quick hobby. So you're investing a lot of your time, and for many things, you're investing a significant amount of money in making that project. So you do want to just knit for the people that you really want to knit for. So with this thing where she says, people offer to pay me, that's great. If people offer to pay you and you want to take a commission project, then the way I approach that is I usually start that conversation by saying, okay, this is something I'm capable of making, and there's a wide range of types of yarn, but I would say ballpark figure this, let's say it's a sweater. This sweater on the low end might cost $80 in yarn. On the high end, it might cost $300 in yarn. So it's kind of up to you what kind of quality you want there. And then I talk about how many yards that would translate to, and I set my price somewhere between 10 cents and 25 cents a yard, depending on, is it something that needs to fit? Is it something that has a complicated stitch pattern? Is it something where I'm going to have to modify the pattern to fit the person properly? So, if it's something like a scarf that doesn't need to fit, it has a simple stitch pattern, then maybe that's a 10 cent a yard sort of project. If it's a sweater, if I have to modify the pattern, if it has lace, there's a lot of things that can make it on the more complicated end, and that would be a 25-cent a yard project. So they can multiply the number of yards times the rate, and then they can figure out like, oh, I'm asking her to make me something that might cost $300 to $500. I didn't realize that that's what I was asking for. So that's where I start, just by giving a ballpark. And then that kind of weeds out anybody that just had no concept and they didn't really know what they were asking for. Or maybe they go, okay, yeah, that's kind of what I expected, and I want this to be really high quality, and I want it to be made really to fit me. So yeah, let's move forward. So certainly probably 60% of the people that have asked me to make things, once we have that very first conversation, they go, oh, okay, I didn't realize what that was. And then those people decline to continue. But the other 40%, that way I'm not wasting my time really getting into details and sending pattern ideas back and forth and talking about different kinds of yarn. If it's a person that in the end is going to be like, oh, wait, I didn't realize it was that expensive. So those 40% already know kind of the ballpark that we're talking about. And then once we talk about details, then they get excited and they're happy about it because they're not shocked by the sticker price. So to answer this person's question about how do I handle telling people you don't want to knit for them, if you don't want to knit for them, just tell them that. Just say something like, oh, I hardly have time to knit for myself. I couldn't possibly do this for you. Or, oh, a scarf like that would take like 60 hours and I just don't have time for that. But, sorry. And if you do want to knit a commission, then you could say something like, oh, I'd be happy to do that for you. I actually take commission projects if you're interested in talking about it. My ballpark rate would be blah, blah, blah. So that's how you can handle either way that you want to go. Question number 2, and our final question for today. I want to buy a remote for my camera to be independent of anyone else for photography. Do you have any tips? Should I buy it with or without a cable? My camera is a Canon, if that matters. Any tips on the actual project of how to capture my knitwear and me at my best? All right. Another question that has lots of questions. So the last one is easiest. The tips on how to capture me and my knitwear at my best. Tip number 1 is take lots and lots of pictures. If I'm taking a picture to do something simple like post to Instagram, I might take 3 to 5 different shots. And that's, sometimes it's because the light's not quite right, or maybe there's a weird wrinkle, or maybe I have my eyes closed or something like that. So I will take a few shots to get a decent one that I can post to Instagram. If I'm doing something like taking pictures for a new knitting pattern, I might take 300, 400, 500 shots. And out of that many shots, maybe 20 of them are okay, good shots, and maybe 5 to 8 of them are the ones I'm going to use for the pattern. So it's really just a numbers game. Like if you take 500 pictures, you're going to have a handful of them that are good. So it kind of depends what your purpose is. Good lighting, I take them outside as much as possible. If it's freezing cold or raining or whatever terrible weather outside, I will take them inside, but I'll be standing right next to a window. So you want to have really good natural light. When you're outside, you want to be in a shaded area. You usually don't want to be in direct sunlight. You also don't want to have really bright sunlight behind you. You want the spot that you're in to be the brighter spot of the picture, because if you have really bright light around you, it's going to make you look dark. So getting the light right is very important. Other just easy tips are like, don't have a cluttered background. If you're in your house, try to have like a empty wall or, just a couch or something like that behind you. If you're outside, just using the grass or a walking path or, a beach or just something plain behind you, maybe just the wall of your house, like a brick wall or a siding wall. If you have a bunch of different, like, I live across the street from a park, and I try to angle my camera and my frame so that you can't see the bench and the grill and the garbage can and the sign and like all the stuff that's at the park. I try to make it so that my body maybe is blocking some of those things and you are just seeing the grass and the trees and that kind of stuff. So having an uncluttered background makes for a nice looking picture. Okay, as for remotes, I actually have two of them. So depending on what camera I'm using, I might use my Canon camera, and with that I have a remote that hooks to the top. So this piece goes onto the camera and this thing sticks into the camera. So this has a little switch on the top that turns it on and off. And then this is the remote that I hold in my hand, and when you push the button, and you can see the light go on, that makes the camera take a picture. So I can be standing many, many feet away from the camera and I can be taking a picture. Now the tricky thing about this so my camera is a DSLR camera, and when you're using one of those cameras, you do have the option to focus, to like put the focus of the camera on a certain point. So when you look into your viewfinder, you'll see a grid. I think mine has 9 little dots, and you can choose which dot is going to be the focus. So if you want it to be the very middle of the frame, you can choose that middle dot, or you can put it over to the side or to the top or to a corner. So it just depends what you want your picture to look like. If you're using those focus dots and using a remote, it gets tricky because you can't tell, like when you're standing in front of that camera, you can't tell for sure which part of the frame you're standing in. So my trick is that when I set up my camera, I will put that focus dot on something in the background. And then when I put my body in front of the camera, I'm looking at the camera and I'm looking at that thing that I focused on behind me, and I'm trying to line my body up so that it's right between those two objects. And actually, when I use my remote, I can hear it. It kind of goes like the focus wheel or whatever kind of makes this little sound if it has to refocus. And so if that happens, I can tell, oops, like I must have moved out of my frame, and then I go back around and I line it up again. So that's kind of nice. If you listen, if you're close enough to the camera, you can listen to make sure that you're not being out of the focus. But again, that goes back to why I take 500 pictures, because out of those 500, probably 100 of them are out of focus. So those are not usable pictures. I want to say this was a gift, so I'm not exactly sure how much it was, but I want to say it was $50 or less. Like, it's not a couple $100, it's in the $50 or less ballpark. My other remote, this is like $20 or less. This was called the iSnap X remote, I believe, and it doesn't come with an app. You have to download the app. Yes, iSnap X remote. So you can see there on the bottom, that's the little icon for my app, iSnap X remote, right there. So it left. Okay, so I'm going to touch that icon, and then the program opens up, and there's the camera. Oh, there I am. So it has, it just has a screen like that, and then if I push the button here, you'll see the screen take a picture. There it is. So if I bring that picture back up, like there I am. So it took a picture while I was pushing this button, and you can flip this around. So I can make it so that it's using the back camera, which is, I would recommend that because the back camera to your phone is a better quality than the front camera. But I could push this little icon and it would flip the camera. Whoop. So now it's showing, or, it's using the front camera. So I can take a picture with the remote using the front or the back. So that is nice to use on iPhones. I'm not sure if it has an Android app, but you could, it's called iSnap. I guess you could look in the Android app store. Is there an Android app store? I've only had iPhones, so apologize for my ignorance on that, but I guess before you bought it, you could see if there is an Android app that goes with it. But this is very handy. Oh, it also has this thing comes off the back of the remote. And the purpose is that if you want to use it to, you're supposed to be able to use it to stabilize your camera or your phone. If you like put it on a shelf or something, this thing is going to help it not fall over. So that's handy too. So I just keep it hooked on the back of my remote. That way I always know where it is. So I use this a lot when I'm posting pictures to Instagram and I'm taking pictures like during the day when my family is not at home. That remote works really well. All right, I feel like I've talked about all the things. So time to stitch together this podcast and get it published. So I hope you have a wonderful couple weeks and I will see you next time. Bye.